Hey guys, I'm Chris. I'm your tour guide here in Savannah, Georgia. I hope you enjoy your free walking tour here with us. We're down here on River Street where it all got started, beginning of the original 13 colony. We're going to do a little run around and take you guys and see some of the most beautiful squares that we have in the entire city. Hope y'all enjoy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, y'all have actually showed up the perfect day for a walking tour. It is the beginning of spring, so it's a little windy, so we have the fluffy mic out just so everyone can get the audio. But we got here, this is Johnson Square. This is gonna be our first official square that the city was actually built in the city in 1733. And just to kind of give you all a little bit of perspective as to what you're gonna continue to see, when Savannah was first settled, the real purpose of Georgia, the colony of Georgia, was to be a military buffer between English South Carolina and Spanish Florida down in St. Augustine. So where we just came from was River Street. We just walked up a 40-foot bluff. And what happened when the colonists got here, they made these massive clearings of land. These are what we call squares today. Now, today we recreate them. We have the beautiful live oak trees everywhere. But initially, the whole purpose of the squares was an ability to mobilize troops throughout the city, right? So if the Spanish ever came and attacked the city, you had a place from the center of the city that you could actually fight them from. So just kind of keep that in mind. But as we're going to walk around the whole city, we're going to have 22 various different squares, and this has kind of become the essence of the city over time. Now, also, when we get to the squares, not all of them, but the ones we'll be seeing today, they're going to have monuments here in the center. This one being, just my own personal opinion, our most significant guy who's buried in the entire city of Savannah. His name's Nathaniel Greene. Now, not going to jump into all the Revolutionary War history too much, but just to kind of give you all a little bit of a refresher, this is the guy who would be the general of the Southern campaign. He was the one who defeated General Cornwallis, pushed him up from the south into Yorktown and forced him to surrender in 1781. That was the catalyst that would eventually lead to the colonists defeating the British during the Revolutionary War. And 3 years after the war was over, he died right outside the city of Savannah, and this is why we have the monument for him here today. All right, ladies and gents, quick little interlude from the history tour. We got our guy Thomas here. He's our hot dog man here in Wright Square. He's got a New York hat on right now. He's not in New York, he's in Savannah. But Thomas, we'll make sure everyone comes and sees you whenever they come visit. Take care, man. All right, guys, so we're leaving Johnson Square. That's our first square in the city. We're just going to do a little square hopping adventure here. We're going to be walking up to our second square that was ever built. It was Wright Square. It was the following year in 1734. In between the two squares, you have what's called Broughton Street. It's your central hub in downtown. It's where your stores, your shops, your bars, your restaurants, your knickknacks, all that fun stuff is. When you come to Savannah, you're going to spend a little time on Broughton Street. No question about it. And here we got it right here behind y'all. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the second square that was ever built in Savannah. This is Wright Square. This was the following year. It was in 1734. Now, just like anywhere else in the colonies, when the settlers first arrived, there was always an indigenous population. Here in the city of Savannah, we were very, very fortunate to have a great relationship with the Yamacraw Indians. And this right here is the monument for a man by the name of Tamachichi. He was the chieftain of the tribe. Now, it's hard to imagine this, but we're actually told in the history of the colony of Georgia, there was a very good friendship, a relationship between the two different leaders. This is Oglethorpe and Tamachichi. Now, Tamachichi was here for the first 6 years Georgia was a colony. He would actually go back to London with Oglethorpe and meet the King of England. It did happen from time to time. Y'all might remember Pocahontas. That was a little bit earlier on, but this did continue on all the way until they got to him. Now, when he passed away, it was in 1739. 6 years into the colony, like we were saying, the relationship was so tight between these two, he actually requested to Oglethorpe to be buried amongst all of his friends, his colonial friends in the city of Savannah. Oglethorpe obliged him. Not only did he oblige him, he gave him a military-style funeral. in which he was one of the pallbearers. And they buried him in the dead center right here of Wright Square in 1739. Now, as y'all can tell, well, it was actually originally the monument was a Native American burial mound. Y'all have probably seen these at some point in time in the past. It's a bunch of rocks that were piled up to kind of look like a pyramid a little bit. Now, over time, things changed a bit, right? We had this man here whose name was William Washington Gordon. He's the guy in the early 1800s who built the railroads that brought all the money to Savannah. Y'all may or may not be aware of this, but Savannah is one of the largest port cities in the entire country. The port right down off where we just were down in River Street, massive. You have huge container ships coming out of in and out of there every single day. But what would take place is over time, we more or less lost this history of Tomochichi, and we had the big burial mound right here. And over time, we got rid of it. And when we're erecting the foundation for this one right here, his remains were found right over here on the right-hand side corner. Now, story tells us we were respectful to his remains and they were left exactly where they were. And this monument was built right to the side of it. So today we still do have Tomochichi's resting place right here in the center of the city. Also, a nice little bit about Washington Gordon here. Not so much him, but it was his offspring, it was his granddaughter. Y'all might recognize a very famous woman by the name of Juliette Gordon Low. Goes way back into the 1800s, early 1900s, but she was the young lady who would start the Girl Scouts of America right here in the city of Savannah in 1912. Okay, this is the very first of its kind. She actually got it from a man by the name of Robert Baden Powell out in England in 1907. And right here around the corner where we're about to walk to is the headquarters today. So let's go have a look at it.
So if you're enjoying the tour so far, why don't you go ahead and click that like button, help others discover this video. And if you would like to watch more walking tour videos like this one, then also consider subscribing to our channel. In addition to New York, we offer tours in Washington, New Orleans, Boston, San Francisco, London, Berlin, and many more cities. And if you have any place that you'd like to see us offer a video tour of, then leave your suggestions in the comment section below. Now back to the tour.
All right, guys, so we made it. The Girl Scouts of America, right over here to my left, y'all's right. This is the Gordon house. This is one of the most prominent families the city has ever had. Of course, Juliette Gordon Low being their most famous member. And this is actually the very beginning, where she had the very first group of Girl Scouts in 1912. There were 16 of them all together. Today, in 2021, ballpark, approximately 2.5 million. So you can see the way it's really grown over time. Also, if any of you ladies watching this right now were Girl Scouts when you were younger, you might recognize the colors on that house. Look a little similar to the Brownie uniforms, yeah? That's where the Brownie uniforms were actually pulled. Her ex-husband was William Low. We're not going to talk very highly of him because he wasn't a very good guy, but his family's house, which is just a few blocks away from here, when y'all come and visit, those are the colors of the actual Girl Scout uniforms. So this is actually where those colors came from, where the houses that actually were their headquarters at one point in time or another. And then we come here to the far, far end of what was the very, very first cemetery in the city. So, city being very new early on, this where we see Collins Quarter, where we see Husk, a lot of five-star restaurants we have here in town. This is the very first cemetery. All those were built on top of the old cemetery. And this was the Jewish plot on the end of the cemetery. Now, if y'all recall, we were talking about it earlier, Savannah was a military buffer between English South Carolina, right there in Charleston, and Spanish Florida. Well, you also can remember Catholicism was the religion of the Spanish Empire, and this was also during the time of the Spanish Inquisition. So there were a group of Jewish people who left Spain and took refuge in England. They came here in the early stages of the colony because they had a doctor by the name of Dr. Nunez who came here and represented 41 altogether. And this is actually where they were buried because everyone over here, they were all Protestant, they were Lutheran, and then the Jewish population got their own plot here on the very end. So this is our monument that we have for it today, and it's right here in between, it's in the median, right on Oglethorpe Street. So that's, of course, that little bit. What we'll do, we're going to just continue on our little walk here. We have the oak trees everywhere. You get the Spanish moss coming out. Something interesting, guys, you'll see the Spanish moss up in the oak trees. It looks eerie, it looks beautiful, it's got a lot of feelings to it. The closest relative that the Spanish moss has is the pineapple. They don't look alike, but I wouldn't recommend trying to eat it. But yeah, that's the closest relative to the Spanish moss. It's not Spanish, it's not moss, but it sounds nice when we say it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna do a quick little break from the history lesson for a second. We're gonna jump into some popular pop culture. So back in 1994, there was a big event that took place in Savannah. We didn't know what was going on at the time, but there was a movie that was filmed here that turned out to be one of the biggest movies of all time. It was a really popular scene that involved a bench and a man by the name of Tom Hanks playing a nice little character called Forrest Gump. Sorry, the bench is gone, guys. It was never an actual bus stop. It was always just a movie prop from the very beginning. You might turn here and see these horses. Well, pretty good indication. These are all one-way roads, and we're not in the UK, so here in the United States, you gotta move, you gotta drive on the right-hand side, right? So if you're to pick up passengers in a bus, you have to be coming from the opposite direction. This doesn't work out so well. But this is where life is like a box of chocolates. Stupid is as stupid does. You know, y'all remember all those fun quotes. But guys, this is, I would have to say, this the place you can always walk here to Chippewa Square, look around, people are always getting their phone, trying to figure out where the feather was going to fall down to. Yeah, it's always fun. It's good people watching square. Also, here in Chippewa Square, this is our center square of all the squares in downtown Savannah. So if y'all ever make, well, unfortunately, we've been missing our last two St. Patrick's Days due to the pandemic. But if you ever make it for March 17th, it's a big party, kind of like the Mardi Gras of New Orleans. Chippewa Square is just littered in green. Green hats, green beer, green clothes, green people, green face paint, green. But y'all come on over here, let me show you guys Oglethorpe here for a moment. Blue skies today, y'all. So this is our man, General James Oglethorpe. This is the guy who's credited with starting the 13th colony. He's the man who designed the city. Actually, a fun little bit. The square system originally comes from Beijing. This is where he was stationed as a young man in the British military. And this is where he actually brought the whole design from. It's called the ward system. So this is where we get the beautiful squares from China. Not so well known, but something interesting. General James Oglethorpe, he wanted a utopia for Georgia. You know, we've heard of these in the past, but in his utopia, he assumed that there would be 4 prohibitions that would have to be put on the colony of Georgia that would help attain this. Now, the first of these was actually no Catholics, okay? England and Spain being at war at that point in time in history. If you're a Catholic in the city of Savannah, you could be a spy for the Catholic cause, so Catholics weren't allowed here, right? Second one, no hard liquor. Beer and wine was legal, liquor wasn't. I could just tell you this, it did not last, it did not take. People tried for about 3 or 4 years, but that was the very first one cast out. Today we actually have what you call a no open container law or an open carry law, where you can just kind of walk around with a beverage anywhere you want. It's got to be in a plastic cup. So those parts have changed since then. Third prohibition. Not well known, and it's unfortunately not for the same moral reasons that we wish it was. Slavery was not allowed in Georgia. Now, you can speculate as to why this actually was, but South Carolina was here 63 years before Georgia was. There were already very wealthy land and slave owners there. Now, if their slavery was allowed in Georgia, we kind of know that the men who had all the money, had all the capital, would have the ability to come in and more or less vie for power a little bit. So by keeping slavery out, you can keep the most wealthy men in the area away from your new colony. So for the first 11 years, slavery wasn't allowed in Georgia, but after that, it would eventually come in. So that's our third one. Our fourth one. I'm smiling, as y'all can tell. This is one that I can only presume any number of y'all are going to be looking at the person next to you laughing about this one, because there was an occupation that was not allowed in Savannah. It's very prevalent in our society today. There's no attorneys. Attorneys aren't allowed in Georgia. Can't do that here. It's illegal. Now, you can speculate again, but I kind of say, if you're a lawyer, if you're in the new colony, if you know the law and you can debate in front of a judge, well, you're going to be a little bit of a challenge to authority, right? So this is most likely why lawyers weren't allowed here. So those were our 4 prohibitions. And this is what's supposed to make a utopia. It didn't work, unfortunately. It's a nice city, but we didn't quite make it that far. So Oglethorpe here, this monument was built in 1910. Beautiful monument, 9-foot bronze statue up top. But the interesting thing, it's not so much this monument, it's what this monument led to. The two men who built this were Henry Bacon and Daniel Chester French. Two very famous guys. Because of what you're looking at right now that was built in 1910, the very next year in 1911, these are the two men who were given the commissioning to build the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. So Honest Abe, which personally I feel is the most iconic monument we have in the entire country, looks the way it does because of this one right here. All right, guys, we made it to the second cemetery. Remember, the first one was right back where we just came from. This is Colonial Park Cemetery. This was put here in 1750, and all the Protestants who died in the city of Savannah between 1750 and 1854, this is where they were buried. Approximately 10 to 12,000 people altogether. Now, amongst this 10 to 12,000 people, there's several ones of notable interest, one of which by the name of Button Gwinnett. Now, if you guys just come over here with me for just a second, Button Gwinnett was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And if you guys can think back, y'all might remember when the colonists were deciding whether or not to go to war with the British in the Revolutionary War, there was something called the Continental Congress. Each colony would send a representative to vote on whether or not they would go to war with the British or not. Button Gwinnett was the representative from the city of Savannah, and he was killed in a duel by his rival, General Lackland McIntosh, about 5 miles away from here. They were both shot in the leg. McIntosh would survive it, but gangrene would set in by Button Gwinnett, and he would die a few days later. He was buried right here. Now, also to point something out about Colonial Park Cemetery, something we'll get into here in just a few minutes down the road, but if y'all look around and y'all come here and spend a little bit of time walking around, there's something worth noticing. Not a single headstone, not one, is in its original location. As a matter of fact, even here with Button Gwinnett, he's buried around here in the general area. So we think it's here, could be right here. We don't really have a good feeling for this because when General Sherman showed up to Savannah during his March to the Sea campaign, his young men, the cavalrymen, would sleep here in this cemetery, destroyed absolutely everything. One of the headstones, not too far away from here, man died at the age of 1,411 years old. Yeah, they were scratching the dates in there and changing them, manipulating everything. Well, they knocked over every single headstone, destroyed everything here. So whenever you see a grave marker in Colonial Park Cemetery, that's about the right location. But y'all, just something to keep an eye out for. This is the only official cemetery in downtown Savannah. It is a beautiful day to be here, to walk around, take in a little bit of the history. But what we'll do is we're gonna walk through here and we're gonna take you to another part called Madison Square. And this is where Sherman actually lived during the March to the Sea campaign. So we'll catch y'all up in that spot. All right, guys, we're here in Madison Square. Just personal, it's one of my favorite squares we have here in the city. Some of the most beautiful houses surround the square, some of the most beautiful trees here in the square. But really, the real reason why this square is really one of the most famous is because this is where General Sherman actually lived at during his March to the Sea campaign. Now, if we can kind of get you guys over here, we'll flip you all around so you can see where the house actually was. But General Sherman arrived at the city of Savannah December 22nd, 1864. He stayed 6 weeks in this city. And one thing we always like to point out is Savannah was the only major city that General Sherman did not burn down on his March to the Sea campaign. Now, he did offer the city to Abraham Lincoln December 26, 1864 as a Christmas present. And ultimately, what we're told many different things as to why this was the one city that wasn't burned, but overall, we're just kind of told the city was too beautiful. They had already surrendered the city in the first place, and there didn't really seem to be much of a need to weigh it to waste. That's the word I'm looking for. So you guys, as we come here, this right here is the Meldrum Greenhouse. This is the house that was probably the premier house in the city at that point in time. This is where Sherman stayed. It cost $93,000 in the 1860s to build it. Ballpark $7 or $8 million today. This is where he would conduct all of his military operations from for 6 weeks. And this is the hospitality that saved the city of Savannah. So when we go in here today, very famous for many different reasons. It's actually the parish house of St. John's right across the way here now. But this is what I'd have to say as far as a house museum or just a marquee place to visit while you're in Savannah. Definitely come drop by the Meldrum Greenhouse and see what it looks like, because houses like this just aren't built anymore. We're going to go on a little bit of a house watching tour now. We're back here in the farther southern part of the historic district. This is where a lot of those beautiful old antebellum homes are going to start coming into play, right? Those big, massive houses that were built in the 1800s are just kind of right here around the corner. So keep an eye out for it. We're going to walk up to Jones Street, and then we're going to hit Monterey Square, and we're going to finish up down in Forsyth Park. Stick around for Forsyth Park. It really is the most beautiful part of the city. So come on. All right, guys, so we're in Monterey Square. Just personal opinion, there's the best squares for trees, there's the best squares for history. This is the best square for houses. So this is where we're going to point out the ward system to everybody. Now, I know we talked about it a little farther down the road, but as we kind of look around the square here, you're going to notice lots of different buildings, lots of different homes. In the ward system, obviously your square is your primary point of interest, the place to recreate, the place to get to know the neighbors, place for community to come together. But then you'd also have what's called 4 truss lots, 4 tining lots. Now, the truss lots were from east to west. So they would have been buildings such as town halls, they would have been public mills, they would have been courthouses, they would have been public buildings for the colony. Then you'd also have 4 tining lots. Now, tining meaning 10. So from north to south, you'd have 10 houses here, and then you come again to the south, 10 houses and 10 houses on the other side. Now, this is the best representation that we're going to have on this tour as to what the ward system would have looked like farther back in the colonial times, because the farther north you go, it's the entertainment district, right? So there's a little bit more restaurants, more bars, just more things to do just for fun. So the better indication you're going to get of what the ward system actually looked like during the colonial times, they're back here in these farther southern squares. So this is our final square for this particular tour. What we're going to do is we're going to just walk a short little distance away. We're going to go to Forsyth Park. It's just a personal opinion. That's all you're getting, and mainly are just personal opinions. But this is the most beautiful location in the city. It's that true Kodak moment. You're going to see what I'm talking about here in just a second. So let's head on over that way. Made it. So ladies and gentlemen, where we started back in River Street, that was settled in 1733. When we get here to Forsyth Park, it's about 150 years later, so we just went through a little time warp. And also, let me say this before we finish up, before I leave everybody. It happens way too often. Too often people come to Savannah and they have so much fun. We have what we call the no open container law here, so you can walk around with alcohol freely. It's kind of a nice little fun perk of the city. But with that, too often people just get stuck way up there on the north side in the entertainment district, hang out at the bars and the restaurants. So when you guys come and visit, please make sure you just take an extra 5 minutes, walk south, and make sure you get to Forsyth Park, because this is really the most beautiful location in the entire city. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope y'all really enjoyed your tour today. When y'all come to Savannah, check out 2 tours in particular. The free Savannah tour. There's also another one called Savannah Ghost Tours. It's an all-inclusive pub crawl that shows you the haunted side of the city of Savannah. So y'all, hope you had a great time. If you'd like to buy me a coffee or a beer tonight, just go ahead and click down there on the bottom and leave a tip. I had a great time showing y'all around, and we'll see you when you come to town.